Hey, good morning and welcome to Sunday Funday from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Hello, Jody Arrington. Happy Sunday Funday, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a fun one. I'm very excited about some of the stuff that we're going to chat about this morning. I want to introduce myself because I know there's a lot of new names in the chat that may not be familiar with the channel. My name is Joshua Ritter. I was a Los Angeles district attorney for 10 years. I left the office, went into private practice as a defense attorney, and I've been doing that ever since then when I'm not hosting Courtroom Confidential. So thank you guys for showing up on a Sunday. Hello to everyone in the chat. I see a lot of familiar names: Alicia K. Mayo and Debbie Blair and Laura Waldy and defense attorney Meow. Thank you guys, Shy Gal. Thank you guys so much for being here. And if you haven't said hello already in the chat, please do. This is a no lurking zone. So please just say hi. Let us know where you're from. It always feels nice to see how much our community is growing. And then, of course, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do all the things that we need to do so that the algorithm knows that we exist this morning. But Sunday Funday was this concept that, hey, why don't we have people call in and leave voice messages? And if they've got questions, we can answer them. If they just want to talk about a topic, we can talk about that topic. And it started out with a few messages the first week we did it, and it's grown ever since then. And you guys absolutely came through. This is going to be a blast. The questions that you guys came up with are absolutely thrilling, and it's a bunch of cases I haven't heard of or cases we haven't talked about, and really, really great just kind of thought experiments for us to go through too. So thank you guys all so much for showing up, for leaving messages, just to hear your voice. It's really fantastic. So thank you again. Should we jump in? Stay to the end. We've got some announcements, as always, some fun stuff coming up I want you guys to know about, but let's get into these messages because we've got a bunch of them, and every single one of them is fantastic. All right, as always, and if you've got questions along the way, Kaylin, if we've got questions along the way, let's go ahead and pop those up too, that we can answer those about these different wonderful topics that you guys came up with. All right. As always, let me know if you guys can hear this. You know, my technical abilities are improving, but still not a completely sharpened. All right.
Hello, Josh. This is Calliope from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on a very, very snowy day. Love your show. You've quickly become one of my absolute favorite channels for law-inspired information. I love the way you explain things. You're so human, compassionate, and knowledgeable and fair. My question is regarding expert witnesses. This is something that I've been wondering for a long time. When either side, prosecution or defense, goes to hire an expert witness that they want, obviously, to support their view of the evidence or facts, how do they find the right person that they believe will give them the opinion that they're seeking? Because obviously the expert witness is not going to lie. At least I don't think so. They're not going to create an opinion that the person hiring them wants. They want to give an objective one. And obviously either side is not going to spend money just taking a chance on an expert witness say, oh, can you review this data here and give us your opinion? And oh, oops, it doesn't conform with what we want. So on to the next one. They'll still.
She's got a follow-up one here. Hold on.
Okay, I was talking too long in that first one. I just wanted to say, I think you got the gist of my question. And thank you so much. Really excited to hear your response. This is Calliope. Bye.
Thank you so much, Calliope. I love that name too. I had a really good friend of mine was named Calliope. Not all that common, from Toronto. So thank you for calling in. Thank you so much for the kind words. That's very, very sweet of you. Experts. First of all, great question. And I'm sure it's something that a lot of people are wondering, because we've been talking about experts in some of these cases that we cover. Do they lie? No, they don't lie. They've got reputations. They've got to, they've got to testify at other trials. I think the first thing to do is to kind of separate what kind of expert are we talking about. There are experts who do not make their living testifying. They are people who are scholars. They are people who are working in their field. They are doctors, people like that who their primary income is coming from something else. Then there's other people who are almost entirely professional experts for testimony at trials. You see this a lot in civil cases, by the way, too. They need, some sort of chiropractic expert, or they need an accident reconstruction expert, or they need all these different experts for different types of, auto accidents, personal injuries, and things like that. But you see them come up in the criminal world as well. And it's funny because some of these experts become in vogue. I remember and I think there still is, but there was a period where ID experts, eyewitness identification experts, were like being called on nearly every one of our cases when I was a DA. And so you'd have to cross-examine, and there was a list of maybe 5 of them who were experts in this, and you'd have to cross-examine these people on, because they felt that the eyewitness identification of a person was completely flawed, and there's all these problems with it. Okay, when you get to those people who are kind of professional experts, no, they're not going to lie, but they also realize the hand that feeds them. And they do this for a living. They usually get called by one side more often than the other, if ever. So they're probably a defense witness. Using the example of the eyewitness ID person, that's a person who they know when their phone rings and they want to know if they can be retained, that is a person who is likely trying to call into question an eyewitness identification. That is likely not a person who wants them to say how good eyewitness identifications are. So they kind of know where their bread is buttered, if you can understand what I'm saying. I think it, like any profession, the degree of professionalism and credibility of these people varies. JC Broadway says, is it true the state pays for the experts for the prosecution, but the defense has to pay for themselves? Well, first of all, the prosecution is only funded by the state, right? The prosecution is the government, so they're taxpayer funded. So you're right. If the prosecution has to go out and retain an expert, yeah, it's going to be paid by the state. It's not coming out of the pockets of the attorneys. They don't have a client but the people of the state that they represent. And the defense is privately retained and will pay for it privately, unless it's a public defender, in which case the state might pay for it, in which case they can go to the judge and say, we need funds for an expert, and the judge can give them funds to hire an expert. So it's not always true that the defense is paying for themselves. It's just usually in a private representation type situation. But usually the prosecution's not going out and hiring experts. Their experts are the detective. Their experts are the medical examiner. Their experts are like the people who already work for the government. It's rare for the state to go out and hire a particular expert that doesn't already work for law enforcement. Sometimes they do, and then when they do, it is paid for by taxpayer funds, because that's where they get all their money from. But okay, I'm giving this long-winded answer. The answer is, these people, you know where these people are from. If you need a certain type of expert, there is, first of all, there's logs of it. There's lists that are kept of these experts that you can go to and consult. You talk to, you know them by reputation, you know them by their scholarly published works, you know them by recommendation from other attorneys. And usually you're not looking for all that particularized type of experts. I'll give you an example that may ring some bells of where you might have trouble finding one. Perhaps like a dog bite expert might be something that is difficult to find, a very niche and particularized field. You're going to have to search around for something like that. And how do we know what their opinion is going to be? You call them up and you say, hey, I have this case. Here's what I am hoping to prove. Here's what I'm looking for. If I sent you some materials to review, could you tell me whether or not you could render an opinion on that? They will do that, of course. Send them out photos, tell them, some basic facts of the case. They're not going to generate a report, but they know that you're not going to hire them unless you're going to give them a favorable opinion. So it is kind of murky. Yes, a lot of times these people are not entirely objective. A lot of times they are, and that's why we allow for the cross-examination. How much are you getting paid? Do you only work for the defense? How many opinions have you given that have ever been different from the one that you're giving today? Because, it is true that lots of times these are hired gun type situation. Doesn't mean that the opinion they're giving is necessarily absolute lies. It just means, listen, like I said, they know where their bread is buttered from. Ambling Soul says, can the judge also deny funds even when they should allow the defense experts? For the judge to flat out deny funds, it would have to be a situation where the judge has determined that it's absolutely just frivolous and there's no merit behind it. I'm trying to think of a situation where I've seen somebody ask for funds and the judge flat out deny it. Usually they give them the funds unless it's just some ridiculous situation and the judge feels like, I wouldn't even allow you to call that expert even if I gave you the funds to hire that expert type of situation. But the judges know they need to be even-handed in this. If they're going to deny someone the ability to put on a defense, that's likely going to create an appealable issue. Gypsy Soul says, does a judge have to deem someone an expert, otherwise a fact witness? Yes, you do have to be qualified as an expert. Usually that's not a problem. How many times have you testified before as an expert? But it is, do you have any published works? All the things that we've seen them go through before. They can either do that through voir dire. They can either do that by sending over their CV. It's rarely a problem, except in situations where it's like maybe this is a person who doesn't usually testify as an expert, but we're asking them to be qualified in this case, in which case you would go into more thorough questioning of them to establish whether or not they can even render that opinion. But yeah, really good question. Interesting scenario when you're dealing with experts, because I'll leave it with this, just not so I'm not entirely cynical. They know that they have reputations. They know that what they testify to is going to be recorded. They know that those transcripts are going to be handed around. They're not going to get up there and just say something flatly untrue. But take a look at some experts who've testified on some big cases. And you will see that they find a way. I mean, I'm thinking to the Phil Spector case, because that's a case I'm very familiar with. They had some experts on there who were just really famous in their field, really established experts in the field of forensics and blood spatter evidence and crime reconstruction. And these people were just, I just felt like they were saying absolutely what they knew they needed to get paid to say. So maybe I am being cynical, but great question, Calliope. All right, let's move on to.
Hey, Josh, it's Tisha. And I am just curious, when you're trying a case as a prosecutor, how you don't get emotional when you're trying to tell somebody's story. Especially children. I just find it so amazing that prosecutors, and especially women, how they hold their composure and don't break down. I think that I would have a terrible time. I couldn't do it, I don't think. Like I said, especially with children. I just like your point of view, and it's good to hear from you, and I'm watching you live right now. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you, Tisha. Again, thank you so much for the kind words. Great question. How do you not get emotional? The answer is you do. You do get emotional. Sometimes it's very difficult. One of my mentors in the DA's office was a guy by the name of Phil Sterling, who I think was one of the finest prosecutors and attorneys I've ever seen. And he was incredibly moving and just one of those people who would speak and you were on the edge of your seat for every word that he gave. And I saw him break down in tears more than once in court. I mean, it was just the moment we'd get to him and, he'd have a hard time keeping his eyes dry because it is incredibly emotional stuff. And, you're feeling it just as much as anybody. So I'll do a story time for you. I had a case that will stick with me forever with a little girl who had witnessed her mother get shot right in front of her own eyes. They were very poor, living in this house where everybody was just renting a different room. It was, maybe a step above a flop house type situation. She's living there with her mother. Her father's not in the picture. Some psychopath is living in the house with them. There's some sort of disagreement, and he bursts open their bedroom door and shoots her mother dead in front of her. And the girl takes off running, and she's, maybe 9 years old at the time, running down the street, calling 911. And we had to put this little girl on the stand because she's an eyewitness to this. She was incredibly brave. She had to identify the man that shot her mother in court. And we played the 911 call where she is frantic and screaming and panicked and doesn't know whether or not her mother is alive or dead and believes that the man is chasing her down the street and she's scared to death. And I got to tell you, listening to that call, having that little girl testify, there was not a dry eye in that courtroom. I mean, I think even the judge was having trouble with that moment. There are incredibly emotionally charged moments. And like you said, Tisha, especially when it comes to children, I mean, it's just, I think it's especially touching to me to see when children have to be the brave ones too. When we have to rely, I needed to rely on her in order to prove this case. I needed her to be strong. And boy, did she come through. And she showed courage. Probably I don't know if I could ever muster myself to go through what she went through. And it was really emotional and hard. Jurors are crying. Everybody's crying. We all needed a break after that one, but great point. Yeah. The short answer to your question is you don't. Sometimes you lose it. And yeah, you're right. I think jurors would appreciate the humanity. How do you prep for that experience? I don't know if you do. I think you realize that it's coming up. This is a question from JC Broadway. I also think it catches you off guard. I mean, so much of what you're doing is just, how am I going to prove this? Okay, I need to ask these questions. I need to make sure that we're establishing these elements. I need to deal with these objections. And you're sometimes caught up in the moment of it so much that you do lose kind of maybe perspective of the human drama that's playing out, but then every once in a while it smacks you right in the jaw and catches you off guard, and before you know it, you're got dust in your eyes. But thank you so much, Tisha. That's a great question. All right, let's keep it going here. These are all fantastic.
Hi, Josh. This is Maureen from Monterey. I apologize for making you work so hard to find the answer to why Sharon Tate's baby was not included in the charging documents of the Manson murders. But since you're an attorney, I think you secretly enjoyed the hunt.
I did.
I had an anecdote I wanted to tell you, but I ran out of time. So I thought I'd tell you now, and it's up to you whether you ever want to share it with your listeners. I heard Jay Leno tell this story a long time ago. He said that when he started to make really good money, he and his wife decided that they could afford a house, so they went house hunting. Their realtor showed them this one house that he really liked. He just liked everything about it. And his wife, on the other hand, didn't like it at all. She didn't know why she didn't like it. She just said the place gave her the creeps. It happened to be the house where Sharon Tate and her house guests were murdered by the Manson family. They found out later. I just thought that was an interesting story, and maybe if you ever have a Halloween edition, you could share it. Do places that have horrible things happen, is there evil that remains, or I don't know. I don't know what it would be, but there you go. That was the story.
Well, thank you so much, Maureen. That is a great idea. Tiffany, jot that down. We need to do a Hollywood or a Halloween special where we talk about haunted locations of murders. I like that a lot. And Maureen, you never have to apologize for making me do work. That's what I'm here for. And you're absolutely right. It was fun looking that up. And guess what? You gave us a little bit more work because we looked this one up as well. There's Jay Leno. And there is an interesting kind of story behind the Tate murder home. First of all, the home, this is what it originally looked like back when the murders took place. And because they had such difficulty getting people to buy it because of its notorious history, it was actually torn down in 1994. And the address of where the Sharon Tate murders took place, the Manson murders, was 150 Cielo Drive, which no longer exists. That same property has now been addressed as 166 Cielo Drive, and that's what it looks like now. And it's this absolutely gorgeous mansion. And the most remarkable thing about it is that it's on this kind of bluff that has 180-degree views of Los Angeles basin. But we tried to find Jay Leno talking about that experience. We didn't find him, but we found the real estate agent who showed him the home that day, whose name was Johanna Falduto. And she said, I remember I was there for a Sunday open house and Jay Leno came in. Jay was looking for a house with his parents, but when I told him this is where the Manson murders occurred, he had zero interest in the house, which I thought was probably not surprising, but you would think he would at least want a tour but I can't, I think there is actually rules on the books that they have to disclose whether or not a murder took place in the home. I'm not sure. If anybody's a real estate agent, let me know about that. But I also don't know how comfortable I would feel. And I'm not the one to be like, oh, ghosts haunt this place, but I don't know how comfortable I would feel to know that like incredible blood was shed in some of the rooms of the home you're about to live in. But anyhow, they solved that problem for better or for worse. It looks like it was a beautiful home, the original one. And now this huge kind of castle looking thing is up in its place. So great question, Maureen. I appreciate any homework that you send me on, any little adventures that you send me on. All right. Let's go on to now, and I think I might have to share my screen again.
Hi, Josh, in Courtroom Confidential. This is Lynette from Arizona. It's really, really neat to become a member. I just became a member today and just had a question that have you ever had to see the case file pictures from the crime scenes, and has anything really gotten to you? And do you find that sometimes jurors have a real problem with this? And can it affect your mental health moving forward after the case, during the case even? Have you ever seen a juror drop out after seeing the pictures from the crime scene? I don't know if they can do that or not, but just wondering, something that I don't know if I could handle seeing that a lot in Delphi. But thank you for everything you and your wife are doing, and we really appreciate you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Lynette from Arizona. That's so sweet of you for becoming a member. I don't know if you're in the chat this morning, but if you are, thank you again and welcome to the crew. Have you ever seen crime scene photos that have been so disturbing to you? Great question. And it's time for another story time. Which, Kaylin, we need to get like a story time flashing banner or something like that. But this one comes along with a warning, because it's a little bit graphic. We're not going to show you any pictures, but I'll describe some stuff to you, and I'll try to leave out the goriest of details. But when I was a very look at Kaylin. That's fantastic. When I was a young law clerk in the DA's office, not even an attorney yet, but just working as a law clerk, I got assigned to major crimes, which is like the place to go, where they handle all the craziest cases, all the high profile stuff, but all the also brutal, awful, complicated death penalty type murders that you sometimes don't even hear about, but that's where they went to, was major crimes, where all the best attorneys were. That's where I met John Lewin. That's where I met Alan Jackson. They were all attorneys in major crimes, along with a lot of other really great folks. And there were maybe a dozen law clerks, and we were just given all the busy work. And to show you too, this was before a lot of this stuff was all digitized. So a lot of our work had to do with bait stamping, which is where you stamp a page number on a page so that you can refer to that later in court when you've got boxes and boxes of documents and you need to go, this is Bates number 234, and everybody can refer to the same thing. And we would have to like literally take a stamp and stamp these pages. Kind of dating myself, but anyhow, I would get handed boxes of stuff all the time. This is a bunch of photographs. Could you organize it for us? This is a bunch of documents. This is a bunch of transcripts, because we were just doing the busy work and getting these trials ready to go. And I get handed a box of photographs from a prosecutor at the time whose name was Rick Ocampo, who was a tremendous attorney and a good friend of mine still to this day. He's now a judge. And it's for this horrible murder that he's working on that I can't even remember the name of the person, because I don't even know how many headlines it made. But I'm going through photographs and I come to, this is, by the way, the first time I'm starting to look at these crime scene photos. So this is the moment you're asking about. How did this bother me? And I look at this one photograph, and it is a completely made bed with a white kind of, whatever you want to call it, duvet on top. The bed is made and clean, and squarely in the middle of it, staring at you, is a human head from where this person had broken into someone's home, killed that person, severed that person's head, and then this is part of this. If you want the gory details later, maybe we'll do that another time, but transported this head to another person's home, killed that person, random people, by the way. This guy didn't have any beef with them. Random people living in their homes, killed that person and put the first person's head on the second person's bed. And that's how it was found when police finally arrived. So how did you feel watching that? Well, yeah, the first time you see it, it kind of gives you chills, and it kind of gives you this, oh my God, this is real moment. But eventually you start to just look at it like evidence, like, okay, how do I use this? How are we going to prove this? Are we going to use this photo? Or are we not? What does this give us? I'll tell you another story. The most gruesome photos, though, I've ever seen was for a case that I worked on, again, in major crimes as a law clerk. And this was the 2005 Glendale train wreck. Do you guys remember this? This was a horrible case where a gentleman who allegedly, and we didn't believe it, there's photos of it, wanted to kill himself. We believe he just wanted to cause trouble. And he parked his SUV on the train tracks of a commuter train in Glendale, California. And the train hit it, and it derailed, and it hit another commuter train going the opposite direction. and 11 people were killed and 177 people were injured. And it was awful. And it was a case that I was assigned to. It was really fascinating because we were seeking the death penalty in that case. And the way we were doing it was the special circumstance was train wrecking, which is actually on the books. Train wrecking, murder by train wrecking can make you death penalty eligible. And I had to do the research and drafting of motions regarding why we were using train wrecking. And the only case law I could find was from 1873. That's how old these laws were and how long they had been on the books and how long had been since anybody had actually used them. But we prevailed and pursued the death penalty. They didn't end up giving him the death penalty. They gave him 11 consecutive life without parole sentences. His name was Juan Manuel Alvarez. Just a horrible, sad little man who did this really awful thing. But the reason I bring that up is that I've seen cases where people have been beheaded. I've seen cases where people have been killed in all sorts of horrific ways. The photos from this case were beyond imagination, because the only thing I can say is when a human body is put in that type of situation where metal and twisting and just people being ripped apart and mangled, it was hard to look at. And that was a case, to go to your question, Lynette, where though we had to show some of these photographs, we blurred a lot of it because it was just a bit too much to show to people. And it started to get to the point of we need to prove things, but we don't need to just shock people for the sake of shocking them. So we were very cognizant of what we were putting the jurors through. Would train wrecking make the convicted a mass murderer? I think he was a mass murderer. I mean, if the definition of a mass murderer is, more than two at once, he killed 11 people in one morning. But the train wrecking, the reason we charged it as train wrecking was that allowed for a special circumstance so that he was death penalty eligible. Murder plus special circumstance makes it a death penalty or LWOP eligible case. So great question, Lynette. And now you guys get to look up the 2005 Glendale train wreck if you're ever interested in it. Really, really awful case. All right. Oh, you're not hearing it. Sorry, guys. Sorry. I will learn this eventually. All right, hold on. Kaylin's waving me down. Thank you, Kaylin. All right, here we go.
Hey Josh, this is Lynette again from Arizona.
You hear that?
I forgot to mention earlier that I am former corrections and for the state, and it was a great job. I enjoyed my job a lot, and sad to see some things that are happening in another correctional facility in New York, but hope everybody gets justice in that situation. However, yeah, it just never paid attention to what happened before they got to prison. And now being true crime junkie, I just always had that question of, would the crime scene photos, be something that you can't unsee? Because I know I have trauma from seeing things. So it'd almost be the same thing. But has a juror ever dropped out or dismissed themselves because of something that they've seen during a case that you know of? So just thought I'd add that. If you want to add this, it's part 2. So thank you. Glad to be here. Bye.
Thank you again, Lynette, a former corrections officer. That's very interesting. And thank you again for joining our community over here. So to add to your question, has a juror ever dropped out or said they just can't take it emotionally in response to some of these photographs. And I am thinking, I don't remember ever experiencing a situation where a juror said, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't deal with these photos, or I can't deal with this subject matter. And that's because hopefully you've done your job in voir dire. I mean, you know, for instance, in the train wreck case, we talked extensively with people about how they're going to see some awful photos. And we talked, they knew going in, this involves the Glendale train wreck. And this, you know, if that is something that you cannot take the subject matter, you cannot take the the looking at photographs, you need to let us know. And sometimes people will say that I cannot do it. I cannot look at this. I cannot deal with this subject matter. Some voir dire can last for a very long time, depending on the subject matter. And I'm thinking about, in particular, when it comes to allegations of sexual assault, we will talk extensively with people about that, because a lot of people have unfortunately experienced that, or they have friends who have, or it's touched their life in some sort of way. And it's also not something that people feel comfortable talking about in front of a bunch of strangers during voir dire. So many times in those situations, you're taking nearly every person privately back into the judge's chambers to talk to them about, can they handle this? And sometimes each one of those conversations is lasting several minutes. So these voir dires can last for days sometimes. But we will talk about graphic photos as well. But I've never experienced a situation where somebody said, I can't. P. Lola's mom says, do juries get mental health counselors? No, they don't. I mean, there are victim advocates that are available in some of the larger counties, but I don't think that extends to the jurors. Yeah, you know, we ask a lot of people and we put them through a lot. I have seen people react. I've seen people cry. I've seen the judge realize that things are emotionally charged and what they've been looking at has been graphic, and they'll ask them to take a break. I've seen, Maureen says, have you ever seen jurors get physically sick from crime scene photos? No, I've seen them obviously react. And listen, we're not trying to like shock people. I mean, we will say, I'm about to show you some graphic photos now, and we show them and then we move on. I'll tell you the stuff that's even more disturbing to me than the crime scene photos sometimes is the autopsy photos. Sometimes you have to show these autopsy photos, and those can be very troubling and bothering to people to look at. I have had, obviously, family members of the victims leave the courtroom. I always made sure to warn them before I'm going to start showing photographs of their dead loved one. But, you know, I think there's something about people who do jury duty, and once they get into it, they do feel this sense of duty, and they do feel a sense of, I've got to see this through. What my job now, I'm really realizing, you know, before I wanted to get out of jury duty, now that I've been sworn in and I realized how important this case is, I want to see this through to the end. And people will try to stick it out through sometimes some incredible hardship. I applaud a lot of the jurors who've given their service. TCA Law Addict says, thankfully, some can in the name of justice. God bless. Yeah, it's absolutely true. There are people who sacrifice quite a bit to take part in juries, and I appreciate all of them for that. Ask Tiffany. She knows. She's been a juror. All right. Great question, though, Lynette. Appreciate you.
Hello to the Courtroom Confidential community. This is CJ in LA from Los Angeles. Congratulations to you, Tiffany and Kaylin, for cultivating and curating a thoughtful and content-rich community. It's hard to believe it's been a year, and I look forward to many more. My question is on the topic of the Menendez brothers. Crazy that I'm of the age where I remember watching the first trial on television. I remember distinctly the SNL parodies and the late night hosts mocking the allegations of sexual abuse. And of course, looking back, it was absurd, insensitive, and atrocious. But it was indeed the sign of the times. Now, I teeter between re-examining the conditions of their trial and the subsequent sentence to the standard of today's times. But then I think about the countless cases of defendants, for whatever reason, be it racial, social, or economic, sentenced to incurable sentences based on the standard of their time. They might have been unfair, obviously racial and prejudicial, but there was no relief. And in fact, it's indisputable that the brothers committed a deeply heinous crime. What are your feelings and thoughts about resurrecting old cases to pass them through current standards? Is it fair or worthwhile as an effort? And if so, where does the prairie end in terms of providing relief? Thanks so much and happy Sunday Fun Day.
CJ in LA, thank you so much. What a wonderful question. And I always appreciate your questions because they're so thought out and interesting. So thank you again. Always love CJ's messages, says Shy Gal. Me too. And I love this question because it's something I've been talking about quite a bit with the Menendez brothers coming up. And it's something that I think it's one of the reasons why we talk about this case 30 years later. You know, it's not just the horrific nature of it. Obviously, they're kind of, you know, these weird, enjoy this weird celebrity status in the true crime world. But it's because the case is still interesting to us 30 years later. And it's not a whodunit. We're not talking about it 30 years later because it's like, oh, did these guys, are they actually guilty? We all know they're guilty. They admitted to it. They testified to it. The question becomes, why? And is the why any reason to grant them some sort of leniency? Does the why mitigate anything that they did? And that is the question that 30 years later, people are still kind of arguing about and still causes people to reflect. Great question. Not what I just said is not entirely CJ's question, but it's a great topic for discussion. But she asks, you know, yes, things have changed. 30 years ago, you're absolutely right. They were mocked for talking about abuse on Saturday Night Live. They were mocked on late night television. I mean, it's pretty shocking when you look at some of the stuff. Yeah, they were, you know, people made fun of the idea that they wore these pastel sweaters in court and that they cried in court about what had happened to them. Really bizarre to think about it in today's lens, that even if you feel these men are guilty of murder, that we would mock somebody who was a victim of sexual abuse repeatedly by their own father. Okay. But CJ's question is, does that mean we take a second look at it now? Should we change, because we've changed culturally how we view this, should we change the verdict, essentially? Is the question that we're contemplating today. And she says, where does it end? Well, that's really the point. It's the precedent that we're setting. That is one of the cornerstones of the law, is precedent. What are we doing today that may change things in the future, and how people, what are we establishing today, and is that a slippery slope? My feeling on all of this is I feel that jury verdicts should be nearly untouchable. I think that the jury verdicts on a case should be the final word on a case, because if we don't have that, then we're going to be in a constant state of limbo. You put on a trial, you put on your evidence, and a jury spoke, and they were the final word. And when it's not guilty, we all walk away from it. And you may feel it was the wrong thing to have done. Redondo Beach says, "I heart jury duty." You're in the minority there, but thank you, Redondo. And when it's guilty, we should be able to walk away from that as well and say the jury spoke, and we may not entirely agree, and maybe we would have thought differently when we saw the evidence, but the jury spoke. Now, I know that as I'm saying this, you go, but what about appeals? Well, appeals are something different. First of all, appeals are rare that a case would ever get overturned or even granted a new trial, and they're based on some sort of what we call reversible error. Did the judge make such a fundamental mistake? Did the judge allow inadmissible evidence? Did the judge not allow certain very important evidence? Did the judge somehow deny a constitutional right to the defendants to the point that we do need to reconsider this, and that it's so impactful? In other words, it's so more than harmless error that we need to give these people a new trial or completely overturn their verdict. That is the rare situation in which you might revisit a verdict. But that's not what we're talking about here with Menendez. That's not what's happening at all. In Menendez, they lost all of their appeals. They've had all their appeals, by the way. They've had many and lost every single one of them. The latest thing that they filed, this habeas, is not you're only allowed to file it once you've exhausted all your appeals. So they're at the very end of their ability to appeal all of this. What we're talking about today is purely this idea of we think about this case differently. And we think that they've done enough time. They've done 30 years in prison. We think that that's enough, given the circumstances, the way that we view this, what they went through now and all of that. And that, to me, is really dangerous territory and really slippery slopes, and really starts to, beg the question of, well, then what are jury verdicts for? If 30 years later, not because of some sort of fundamental constitutional error, but just because you don't like it 30 years later, we're going to change it? I got a real problem with that. And I know that they've been model inmates, and I know that they went through, I do believe that there was evidence that they went through sexual abuse. But does that undo the verdict? And the verdict was based upon having shotgunned their parents to death, having reloaded and gone back and put a gun against a shotgun barrel against the face of their mother, and then finally took her life, having pre-planned all of this, having covered it up, having lied about it, having tried to get others to lie about it. Don't forget the really awful circumstances of this murder. Do I think that nowadays the trial may have turned out differently? Perhaps. I still think they would have been found guilty of murder. But I don't know. I hope I'm explaining all of this well. I just feel like, if anything in the law, one of the things that should be the most difficult to overturn is the verdict of 12 jurors. That is something that if we can't rely on that, and that's all going to change just because we've decided to change it because we don't like it, then we've got real problems. Afton says, wasn't the abuse not allowed in the second trial or for mitigation? It was allowed, just not nearly to the extent it was allowed in the first trial. What wasn't allowed in the second trial, which, again, I do have a problem with this, was that they were not allowed to argue the concept of imperfect self-defense. They were not, in the second trial, Eric testified to the abuse. The jurors did hear about it, but they were not allowed to then tell the jurors what you can do with that is find that they were, they had an honest but unreasonable belief in the need to use deadly force. And if you believe that, then you could find them guilty of manslaughter. That was presented in the first trial, by the way. And they didn't get off. It had a hung jury. So even if that evidence had come through, nobody's saying that they would have gotten manslaughter, but it was something they were not allowed to use in the second trial. This case, again, you can see why we're talking about this case for 30 years later, and we could talk about it all morning long. Their sentence was LWOP, according Krista Johnson asked. Yes, they are currently sentenced to life without parole. So what's happening now with this resentencing is they're trying to strike the special circumstances that we talked about earlier, making them a straightforward life case where they would be eligible for parole. June Sidlakas asks, do you think that some of what happened in the Brothers trial is this fact that it was on the heel of O.J. Simpson not guilty verdict? June, I love that question because I have been talking about that a lot. I think that it is absolutely part of all of that. The Menendez trial took place. The Menendez trial is declared a mistrial in, I don't have the dates. I think it was 1990. 4. If I'm wrong, you guys are going to tell me. By like February of that year, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman are killed. By October of that same year, O.J. Simpson is acquitted. And I think it's 8 days later, Menendez Part 2 starts. The absolute earthquake that went through the country, the legal community, but especially in Los Angeles after the O.J. Simpson acquittal, you cannot tell me that did not have a profound effect on the way that the second trial was handled, on the way that the prosecutors viewed it, on the way that the judge viewed it, and perhaps even on the way that the jurors viewed it. Absolutely. All right. Good questions, everybody. God, this is so much fun to me. I hope you guys are liking spending your Sunday morning doing this, because I am enjoying it. You guys are just asking the best of questions. All right. Redonda Beach says, this old lady just applied. Whoa. Congratulations. Good for you. I love to hear that. Oh, and thank you, Patricia. All right. Where are we at here? I gotta get my bearings together. All right. Hold on. Tell me if you can hear this. Oops. All right. Why does this keep happening to me, Kaylin? You gotta, she's trying to give me hand signals to tell me how to get my life together. I need more than hand signals. All right.
Hey, Josh and everybody at Courtroom Confidential for another Sunday Fun Day. This is Holly in Houston, Texas. Welcome, everybody. If y'all did not listen in to last Sunday Fun Days stream, I really recommend. That was so much fun. We had a lot of fun. There were some people also that sang. Yes. So my request, well, I have two things because they're not both questions. One is a request and one is a question. So let's start with the request, shall we? So I want Josh, either you or your lovely wife, to sing. Yes. So 2 verses, 2 choruses, and an outro chorus if you so want. I think that would be awesome. What do you guys think? Hit the like if you'd like to hear it.
Oh.
The question that I have, if you had the opportunity to run for judge, would you? Why or why not? And what positive things do you see about being a judge? And what not so positive things do you perceive about being a judge? Well, I'm so glad to be here with everybody. Look forward to it. Bye.
Oh, Holly putting me in trouble. First of all, I realized Holly said me or my lovely wife. So Tiffany, feel free to step up to the microphone. Am I gonna sing? Listen. Well, before I start singing, it's gonna have to be for some sort of super celebration. Though I will tell you that my 4-year-old and I do a mean rendition of Don't Stop Believing by Journey. She will belt that out at the top of her lungs. I got her hooked on that song at a very young age, and she loves it still. Tiffany says, not in your wildest dreams. Maybe I'm gonna need a little more than coffee in my cup to kind of work up the courage to do that. We'll see. Maybe on members only, I'll send you a guy or show you guys a video of me and my 4-year-old singing Don't Stop Believing. P. Lola's mom says, thank you for making Sundays work fun, cash train. Love it. But would I be a judge? Would I run for judge? First of all, I don't think I'd ever run for judge. I don't know if I ever want to go through a political campaign for anything. But would I ever be a judge or be appointed a judge? Thank you, Alicia. I am raising them right. I asked her the other day, what kind of music do you want to listen to? And she said AC/DC. And it just brought such pride to my heart that I've taught that little girl so well. I think I would be a judge for like a day. I think I would love to experience, presiding over the situation and calling the shots and watching this all play out in front of you. But it's funny, I don't really have an interest in it. I know a lot of colleagues who are like, that is the end goal for them. I think a lot of attorneys see it as kind of their kind of golden years career where they can kind of just be a judge and retire from there. A lot of judges, do that well into their retirement years. I mean, I think there's the benefits of, you've reached this kind of pinnacle in the legal career, and there's the ability to kind of be the one calling the shots and presiding over these incredibly impactful and important cases. But I'll be honest, I don't really have an interest in it. I enjoy my freedom. They have to go to court every single day. They have to be in the same courtroom every single day. They still have bosses. They got somebody who's assigning them where to go, what courthouse they're assigned to, what cases they get. They don't get to choose. They've got the politics of it. They've got to run their calendar properly. They've got people kind of barking at them that they're, things are staying on their docket for far too long. A lot of it sounds not what I'm interested in. And then I feel like I would be just frustrated with watching people do when I would rather do. Do you know what I mean? I would rather do than watch. And if I'm sitting there and I'm watching these attorneys, couple of knuckleheads, try to figure out how to put on this case, and I'm frustrated by the whole thing, I think I would be very bothered by that and just wanting to rip off my robe and say, let me do this. Ned Smith says they have to stay up on all the laws. They do. They've got a bunch of support staff, but yeah, you got to be on top of all the laws. You've got to also, there's not to mention the pressure of it. You've got to make some incredibly difficult calls. I mean, we watch a lot of these cases and we talk a lot about these pretrial motions, and we're all like, what is the judge going to do? And we're all second guessing everything the judge does. It's difficult. June says, did you have or ever met Judge Ito or Judge Hank Goldman? I think I have actually met both of them, but I don't think they were on the bench when I was practicing. I know I've never appeared in front of either one of them. I'm trying to think of what kind of famous judges. I can't think of any. It's hard for a judge to really make a name for themselves, but many of the judges who are the ninth floor of the criminal court building here in Los Angeles is where all the big cases are. And I've appeared in front of nearly every single one of those judges and had trials in front of a lot of their courts. But the judge that did the Phil Spector trial is still there. Many of these judges who've handled some of these really huge cases are still there. But Ito retired, and I think Goldman retired, or may have passed. I'm sorry if I don't know that, and I apologize for not knowing that. But great question, Holly. And I will try to get Tiffany warmed up to the idea of singing for you, because I think you guys deserve that, and that's what you asked for. All right, moving on here.
Hi, Josh, Tiffany, and crew. Love all your shows, and they're so well done. This is Kathy Davidson from Yakima, Washington, and I have always liked true crime shows and true crime books. But until I retired, I did not know about all the YouTube streams and trials. And boy, have I learned so much, and now I am addicted. What I would love to see in the future is for your thoughts and for you to follow any updates on the Zizian alleged cult. Love watching your shows. Keep up the great work. Bye from Yakima, Washington.
Thank you so much, Kathy from Yakima, Washington. God, this is a strange one. I had not heard of this, but for a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, Tiffany turns to me and she goes, "Have you been following the Zizian case?" And I look at her like, "What in the world are you talking about?" But we did some research into it, and I will tell you this. If you really want to know about this case, Gisela from Grizzly True Crime did a fantastic video on this. Do we have the link, Kaylin? I have it. Okay, she's got it. Please go check it out. She does one of her deep dives on I think it's on a live stream where she talks about this case. And if you know Gisela, and I know a lot of you do, her deep dives are fantastic, and she's very thorough. And she does one on this case, and I'm not going to even nearly do it justice in the short period of time we're going to talk about it here. So I encourage you to go watch it. And if you guys do watch it, do me a favor and just put in the comments that we sent you over, because she shows us so much love and so much support. And I am so grateful to her that if I can give her even the smallest bit of appreciation and thanks and support back, that would make me very happy. To just tell her the Courtroom Confidential crew sent us over to watch this video, and here we are. Kathy says, or C. Taylor, Kathy says, yes, Gisela did a great deep dive. Yes, you've seen it, Kathy. Gisela does great deep dives on everything. Real happy is a part of the Grizzly crew. So here's the shortest version, and maybe we will get into a longer version. Maybe I'll even ask Gisela to talk to us about this, because we're having her on soon. So this individual here, they were born Jack LaCosta. They now go by the name of Ziz LaCosta. This person transitioned, is transgender from male to female, and started this cult, is the best way to put it. The term Zizian just comes from a follower of this Ziz person, but I don't think they refer to themselves as that. But it arose out of this, what's called a rationalist movement. It's just kind of a radical way of thinking. They all sound like they come from backgrounds that are smart and well educated. This person is I think was involved in the tech industry. I mean, they're not kind of, your Manson drop out of society type folks. But it's very, for some reason, there's a lot of people in the transgender community a part of it. It's heavily on veganism, and it's heavily into anarchy. In this wild, changing, twisting story, at one time, Ziz fakes her own death. There's a fake obituary put out when I think law enforcement was looking into speaking with Ziz. But long story short, this cult and what it's going to really come down to was it at the orders of Ziz, is good for, according to law enforcement, 6 potential murders, including in one case, they were had like vehicles and campers on the property of this one gentleman, then they were paying him. And some sort of dispute arose. They end up stabbing the man, I think taking out one of his eyes. That's an attempt murder case against him. But before they can even get to trial on that, he is then killed. So that's one of the murders that they're trying to link to LaCosta. LaCosta was arrested on February 16th, has not been charged with murder yet, but it looks like that's exactly the way that law enforcement is trying to patch this all together. And by the way, these crimes take place all over the country. So they were like this kind of traveling band of people, but there's also this kind of internet connection. And it's a very bizarre case. Like I said, I'm just scratching the surface of the surface talking about it this morning. Check out Grizzly True Crime's coverage of this, but we will either talk to her about it more or do some more coverage on it ourselves, especially now that Ziz has been arrested, and there might be charges coming on the murders. It does have Manson vibes. Katrina Bunny says that. That's absolutely what I was thinking. because it's going to come down to that same thing. How much can they say of these murders where it sounds like a lot of the murders were committed by other people, but how much was at the direction of La Costa? So we will see. But great question, Kathy from Yakima, Washington. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that all plays out. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking about that case more. All right. Onward.
Hey, Josh and Tiff and mods and chat, everybody at Courtroom Confidential.
You guys hearing that? Okay.
This is Holly in Houston, Texas. And Houston, we got a problem and we seriously need Josh to break it all down. Enter Idaho 4. Now, there was a doc drop yesterday and there was another one today. I usually refresh the web page more often, but I was busy cooking for the fam and I just sat down. It is Tuesday the 25th. It's about 2:23 p.m. my time, and boy, are there ever some updates there. And prosecution is just tightening the noose. They made so many points and they're really wanting to narrow this down, right? We seriously need y'all to break it down for us. Y'all do so much and I'm so grateful. I love it here. Y'all please like, share, sub, do your best to just show up because it just keeps everything, it's cool to be doing true crime together. So we need to do this. So if there's any way that y'all could possibly make time to, give it to us in a broken down, easy to understand form, like y'all are so good at here, I would seriously appreciate it because there's just so much. All right, guys, bye.
Holly from Houston, you are such a wonderful person. Thank you so much for all the kind words and cheerleading that you do. Great question. What is going on with Kohberger? And you're right. She says they're tightening the noose. They absolutely are. What they're doing is they are getting this case prepped for trial. And that includes a lot of right before trial. What you have are all these in limine motions, evidentiary motions, and it just confines the universe that you're going to go into trial on. Everybody wants to know, what is the landscape? What are the parameters? What exactly are we going to be presenting to the jury? And so that, it's going to include a flurry of in limine motions from the prosecution for, we don't want them getting into this. And we want your ruling, Your Honor, on these issues ahead of time, because we're not going to be litigating this in the middle of the trial. We're not going to be making objections to these surprise things in trial. So let's get this all hashed out now. So 2 big motions were filed by the prosecution. And I think this is what Holly was referring to. The first was motion in limine re alternative perpetrator evidence, and the other was motion in limine re alibi. And they're both essentially trying to do the same thing. They're trying to say the defense needs to either put up or shut up on this stuff. And if they don't, we want it all kept out. So the first one has to do with alternative perpetrator evidence, which is basically, we talked about it before. You can call it third-party culpability. You can call it alternative suspect, whatever it is. It's the idea of the defense saying, not only did our guy not do it, but this guy probably did. The defense can always say our guy didn't do it. The defense can always call into question why the police believe that their client is guilty. But when you start to put on affirmative defenses, when you start to say things, not only did our guy not do it, but this other person did do it, you're going to have to get the okay from the judge, because the judge isn't going to let you walk into court and just start throwing spaghetti around the courtroom, hoping that something sticks and that the jurors might be confused by the whole thing. And that's what it comes down to, is a question of, first of all, relevance. In other words, is the alternative perpetrator more or less likely to prove the guilt of the defendant? In other words, we've all heard about this other DNA in the home, okay? There was DNA on the handrail. There was DNA found in a glove outside. Is that evidence of alternative perpetrator? Perhaps, but the question then becomes, does the existence of that make it more or less likely that the defendant is guilty? And the judge, I think, views this as it doesn't affect the guilt or innocence of the defendant. The fact that there may be other DNA in that home not only doesn't get us all the way to saying that that person participated in the murders, but even if that person may have participated in the murders, doesn't mean that Bryan Kohberger's DNA wasn't found on a knife sheath at the murders that are stabbing murders. Okay. So that's first question, is the relevance of it. And then the second question is, as always, a balancing of probative and prejudicial value. And if the judge feels that this will be prejudicial in the sense that these other alternative perpetrators will either mislead or confuse the jury and add real no probative value, meaning push the jury towards the goal of arriving at a verdict, but will instead just confuse them, they're not going to allow it in. So I don't think this stuff will be allowed in. How would he present an alibi without testifying? Great question. And that's the next thing I'm going to get to, but great question, Afton. So I think the judge on this alternative perpetrator thing, especially when it relates to the DNA evidence, may allow the defense to ask things like, how thoroughly did you investigate? Did you recover any other evidence? Were you able to identify that other DNA? No, we were not, and just probably stop them there. But when they start to, and let them argue. If they want to argue this was a myopic rush to judgment, go ahead and do it. But I don't think this idea of that person who is the killer and not my client I don't think we're going to be seeing that much. So to Afton's question and to Holly's second part of her question, there was this motion in limine regarding the alibi. So the defendant has said when regarding alibi that he was out for a drive as he had want to do because he liked to go hiking sometimes and he liked to look at the stars. So everybody talks about the guy was out stargazing. Well, that's not alibi evidence. What the prosecution is saying, we want names and addresses of witnesses. If you're saying your guy wasn't at the crime scene, where was he and who was he with and how are you going to establish that? That's what an alibi is. An alibi isn't, I wasn't there. An alibi is, not only was I not there, I was somewhere else, and I'll prove it to you. Again, it kind of goes to that same thing. They can cross-examine the prosecution. The prosecution has the burden. They can always call into question the prosecution's evidence placing their client at the crime scene. But when you start to say, not only did you not prove my client was there, but here's where my client was, you got to get an okay from the judge. And the same thing goes here. What is your evidence that he was somewhere else? Because we need to know that, because we need to prepare for it, because you can't blindside us with it. And that's what the prosecution is saying. They have requested this alibi evidence for 20 months now, and they haven't gotten it. And so they're saying at this point, even if they have it, it's unrealistic for us to be able to prepare for it. So if you're saying he was somewhere else or with someone else, and you're going to throw that at us at the 11th hour, we're going to have problems. I think end of the day, they don't really have that. I think what they have is some geolocation on his phone, and they're going to call an expert to say that, how cell towers work or how GPS works and all of this other kind of stuff and the timing, and probably call into question the time of the murders. And if they can put the murders at a different point than what the prosecution says, then they can say their client was not there when the murders actually took place. And I think you're going to see a lot of that, which is just kind of traditional impeachment of the government's evidence, but it's not necessarily alibi. I think that's how you'll see it play out. Holly says, isn't stargazing alibi slang term for watching ladies too? Perhaps. Maybe that's what's going on. But yeah, you're right, Holly. This is they're just tightening the universe of what's going to be presented to the jury, and the defense has kind of fired all their bullets ahead of time as far as the DNA. So this case, I think is on track, and I think it's not going to be going all that well for Mr. Kohberger coming into it, but it's a case we will be following closely. Oh, I got a question for you guys. we haven't done one of our case notes in a while where we do kind of a deep dive into a case. Let us know. Please comment if you'd be interested in us doing a deep dive into the Kohberger case. That was one of the ones we were considering, perhaps really getting into where things stand now before trial is set to begin later this year. So let us know. We'll perhaps that will be coming up soon here. All right. Wait a minute. Blessed in Texas says, since LA, no EDB in person, work together. Great question, Blessed. I've been asked this before. We were in the office at the same time. This is Emily Baker. But we didn't work together. It's a big office. There's over 1,000 attorneys. It's the largest prosecutorial agency in the entire world. I believe we were never assigned to the same office location. It's not like we all work out of the same courthouse. There's dozens of courthouses around Los Angeles, and our paths never crossed. But I know people who did work with her, and she had an excellent reputation. And I obviously am well aware of the work that she does on YouTube, and I think she does a tremendous job. So thank you for asking the question. Redondo says, my dad was a judge, never lost an election. He's the standard by which I measure all others. Oh, that's very sweet. And good for Pop for doing that. That's the other thing. You become a judge, you win the election, and then you got to run again. And sometimes people run against you. Alicia K says, I miss case notes. So yes, sir. Okay, then we'll do it. I like the Kohberger case too. I think there's a lot of stuff to get into on that one. All right. Let's get to our next question here.
Hey Josh, this is Tracy from Orlando, Florida, and I just have a question about the Karen Reed trial. Are unspoken objections a due process violation? Love your show. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy from Orlando. Are unspoken objections a due process violation? I think, Tracy, and if you're in the chat, let me know, but I think what you're asking here is when the judge doesn't allow for speaking objections, is that a due process violation? And if that is not your question, I'm going to answer that question because I like that question. But Cannoni is one of these judges that's got a real strict, bizarre treatment of objections. First of all, speaking objections are kind of across the board, usually not allowed in courtrooms. Even when the judge doesn't have some sort of, order in place. You're usually, as an attorney, not standing up and giving some sort of miniature argument every time you make an objection. But Cannoni goes that one step further and only allows for the attorneys to say the word objection without even stating the grounds for it, the basis for it. I will tell you, I think this is just dumb. I really do. First of all, I have a real problem with whenever we treat jurors like these delicate little children that, heaven forbid, their ears are graced with something that they might have to handle. I mean, I appreciate trying to avoid situations where you can't unring the bell. I'm all for that. But this idea that an attorney cannot say objection hearsay, and the jurors can't go wild with speculation as to what the hearsay is. I just don't. I don't buy it, and I don't like it, and I think it's dumb. And that's what we're talking about here. The attorneys in the Karen Reed case can only say objection, and then the judge has to imagine what that is, why they're objecting, and then overrule or grant the objection. And to me, yeah, listen, first of all, I will say most of the times experienced judges and lawyers do know what the objection is, right? So many times this doesn't cause a problem, but sometimes it does. And I think there's a lot of issues you're raising here. One, the attorneys are not able to actually lay the proper basis for appeal, because part of an appeal needs to know the grounds for the objection. So, many times appeals are problematic because they say you didn't preserve this on appeal because you didn't object Well, how do you object when you're not allowed to give the basis for that objection? Okay. And then secondly, because attorneys know that, and because they want the judge to know why they're objecting, or because they have a problem with the judge ruling without really knowing why they're objecting, we go to sidebar all the time. And that doesn't save any time either. And it's all these endless sidebars that are absolutely kind of infuriating. So, objection, relevance, hearsay, leading, what does that do? What harm does that do? I think it makes the trial flow more evenly. I think it makes the attorneys feel comfortable that they've given the basis for their objection. I think it lets the judge know exactly what the attorneys are thinking, because I'll tell you, sometimes the judges don't know exactly where the attorneys are at. But when attorneys start standing up and saying, Your Honor, he's misleading the courtroom, we've proven that obviously that kind of stuff needs to stop it. But to Tracy's point, I don't know if it creates a due process problem, but it certainly creates appealable issues. And when they make their appeals, you can bet all of those attorneys sitting right there, if they have to make an appeal on this, and it comes down to the objections not being able to give the grounds for the objection, that's going to be a due process situation on appeal. Katrina says, what about making a record for appeals? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. What if defense claims a different basis than what the judge imagines? 100%. That's the problem. Many times, like I said, we all know, but sometimes we don't. And that's where you start to see objection, denied, can we approach? And then you keep on doing these can we approach things, and it just drags out the whole works. But if instead they were allowed to say objection, facts not in evidence, the judge might go, oh yeah, that hasn't been established yet. Go ahead and clean that up, counsel, on your questioning. Lamam James says, is it required that the judges say the word overruled or sustained? Canoni says things like, let him have it, or she just rephrases the question to the juror. It's not required. Overruled and sustained are just the rulings on where she's going or allowing it. I think let him have it is basically saying overruled. I've seen judges handle this all sorts of different ways. She does tend to like to just ask the question again herself, which is funny to me. Well, no, the question will be, did you knock on the door of the home? Objection. And then Canoni will go, did you knock on the door of the home? It's like, I don't know why that somehow she feels that clears things up, but it always cracks me up. This case is never ending entertainment or torture, depending on your point of view. All right. Let's move on here to our next question. Again, you guys love these questions. These are fantastic. I'm having a blast. All right. Here we go.
It's Damaris from England. I just wanted to say, please ignore and disregard the 3 waffly messages that I left previously. It's old news. It's not really informative for anybody. Anything that you would respond is probably not going to increase anybody's knowledge or education or interest. So please disregard. I'm in the middle of listening to your show from last night with Joel, STS. Fascinating cases. The Adelsons, the Menendez brothers, just heartbreaking situation. My 15-year-old's obsessed with that case. And, I have my own personal opinions, but then obviously we have to think, what is the law? Anyway, love your channel, love your show. Sorry for all the waffle. I have so many questions and so many things that I want to say, but I realize a lot of them are probably based on the way the US is constructed, with each state being able to make their own rules and politics and things like that. So I'm trying to whittle them down, and I'm not doing very well. Anyway, much love from England.
Oh, Damaris, you're such a sweetheart. Thank you. Damaris had left us a couple of messages before, but but we're going to respect your request to not play them. I thought they were great. I don't think you needed to worry at all. I don't think you were waffling. I think you were just trying to think through these issues like we all do. But we appreciate you, always appreciate hearing from you. And the questions you have are always so thoughtful. So thank you. I'm not going to get into the questions that you asked before, but I will get into a topic that you brought up, if you're okay with me doing that, because I thought it was interesting. And it also leads to another story time. But it dealt with the idea, story time. We should have, can we get like the reading rainbow thing to flash over us? It has to do with discovery violations and how do judges handle this when you've got real problems. The remedies in a discovery violation. So if we're talking about a discovery violation, really from either side, defense or prosecution, it usually means somebody's handing over something well after the time they should have handed it over, and they're kind of this idea of sandbagging and surprise stuff. The instances in which you have in court where you see on TV where somebody pulls out some surprise document and shocks everyone with this turn of events in court just does not happen. There has to be an incredibly rare circumstance where this is an issue that no one saw coming, and then you can impeach somebody with a piece of evidence. But usually that's evidence that's been turned over anyways. It's just nobody's been talking about it. So usually what happens is you get a dump of information, and the judge goes, okay, what are we going to do about this? This is too late. And they have to start thinking about remedies. Do they give the other side more time to go through all of this? Do they, allow them to grant them a motion to continue? Do they allow them to voir dire these potential witnesses so that it's like, okay, well, you haven't heard what these people are going to say. We're going to put them on the stand and you can examine them ahead of time. Or the most drastic is, do they exclude the evidence? Do they say, sorry, too late? You know the discovery rules. You waited too long. You were sandbagging it, and this is surprise stuff. And the remedy is exclusion. We're not going to allow you to have it. Lots of times that happens on the prosecution side, by the way, too. Rarely do you see the judge not allow the defense to have it because of the issues it creates, but they'll say sometimes to the prosecution, you messed up, too late. But I will tell you, it creates a lot of frustrations. And this is my story time. I had a case earlier last year, just a monster of a case, 60 count indictment, thousands and thousands of pages of documents that we were dealing with. And days before trial, we're in court about to discuss jury selection. And I just happened to say, Your Honor, I just want to make sure that we have everything from the prosecution. This is obviously as a defense attorney. And then we find out that there's like 6 boxes of materials we've never received. And I appropriately lose my ever-living poop in court and say, this is outrageous. And the judge's remedy was, okay, well, how much more time do you need? And I was like, I need 6 months. I don't know what this is. I've never seen it. You're asking me to tell you how long it's going to take me to get through 6 boxes of I don't know what. Give me 6 months. He said, I'll give you 2 weeks. That was his remedy. And it's just like an insult at that. What am I going to do for 2 weeks? You flip through stuff and hope to find something. It's absolutely impossible. You're looking for needles in haystacks and given 2 weeks to go through the haystacks. So that's usually the way these things play out. Is it's just frustrating. And thank you, Tiff Knox. It was outrageous. And it was, it was unfair. And this was a thing that had taken place for so long, and they had it. And I don't think they purposefully sandbagged us. I think they just didn't realize they had turned it over, but that's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem. And if that means the trial has to wait, that means the trial has to wait. But, that's how it played out. And that's why you see attorneys get so losing their heads over these discovery violations, because it's like, it's one thing to be, especially on the defense, feel like you're behind the 8 ball most of the time anyways. And then it's another thing to be doing that and realizing that you are now, not only do you got one hand tied behind your back, but now there's surprise punches coming from nowhere. So to torture a metaphor. But great question. Thank you so much. Well, it wasn't your question, Damaris, but thank you for calling in and for being so supportive. Hey, Mona says, have you ever had a case with Judge Cohen from the Monica Cementelli trial or with prosecutor Beth Silverman? I know prosecutor Beth Silverman very well. She was also in major crimes when I was a law clerk there. She is also tremendous. She's also incredibly qualified. I was not her direct law clerk, but I knew her well. She's a real hoot of a person and has a great personality and a tremendous attorney. But I've never worked with her, but I've seen her many times. Judge Cohen from that case is the finest judge I've ever been in front of in my entire career. He is, I think, just incredibly respected, probably the most respected criminal judge in all of LA County. I would happily say that. And he's phenomenal. And he does this thing. I mean, the guy's like near genius level stuff. He's the judge that other judges call. When they've got a question, they call up Judge Cohen. And he's got these, he's old school. So he's got a bunch of card files in front of him. Like you remember back in the old Western times when we were children, and they would you would have the Dewey Decimal System at the library, and you'd have to go through all the cards to find the book that you were looking for, and they were in those long kind of cabinets. He's got those kind of set up on the bench, and you'll be talking to him and arguing some issue, and he's kind of listening to you, but then you see him starting to rifle through stuff, and he picks out a card here, and he picks out a card there, and he politely lets you finish. And then he goes, according to People versus Sanchez, 1986, case number, blah, 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 blah. The prosecution's our objection is overruled because of da, 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 and just card after card, citing authority. The guy just knows everything before you know it. And just, that's why he doesn't get overturned at all, because everything is based on case law that he knows so well. He's incredibly experienced. He's also incredibly strong as a defense attorney. I've been in front of him both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. In defense attorney, I was in front of him and he dismissed a case of mine because he had the guts to do it. I can't say enough good things about him. And I remember when I was a prosecutor having a case in front of him for the first time, I was a little intimidated because I had heard so many tremendous things about him, but he was so kind that I remember several times I just knew when to object because he'd give me a look, and I wouldn't even know that I needed to be objecting, but I would look over at him and he's giving me one of these things, and I go, objection, Your Honor. He goes, sustained. And I didn't even really know why I was objecting, but he would already know what was going on before I did. And I learned real quick, just follow that man's lead. He's a really, really tremendous judge. Oh, give me the tea, says Tiffany. Yeah, he's great. Thank you for asking that. That came out of nowhere. I'm glad I got to think about him and thank him for all his mentorship over the years. All right. Let me see if I'm getting to the right thing here. Yes. Okay. Oh.
Hello, my name is Ruan, and I love your show. I listen to it. I mostly miss the lives, so sorry about that. But I wanted you to talk about the recent documentaries about Gabby Petito and the lack of response from Brian Laundrie's parents, and now they don't like their lack of duty that with that case and how they're being portrayed in the media. Thank you. Thank you, Josh, for all you guys do, and keep up the good content.
Thank you so much, Ruan. Great question. If you guys haven't seen that new Gabby Petito documentary on where is it? Netflix. Yeah. Really good. It's a 3-part series. Really, really good. I highly recommend it to you guys to check it out. it one of the things, Tiffany and I watched it, and one of the things that we came away with, I turned to Tiffany and I go, I hope that Brian Laundrie's mother never has a good night of sleep again. And I hate to kind of wish ill will on people, but it was one of the takeaways that I had from that documentary of how kind of heartless these people were. And it's one thing, listen, for the grace of God, anybody has to go through what those people had to go through. And the idea that your own son shows up at your doorstep and says, I've done something incredibly awful, that I sympathize with, but I also feel like it was really heartless in the way in which they handled this whole thing and the lack of kind of empathy for what the Petito family was going through. Watch the documentary. It's really good. But she asked, like, what is being done? Well, I don't know if this is exactly your question, but there was a lawsuit, just to catch you up on it already. Emily says she's with me. Thank you, Emily. First of all, they had a wrongful death lawsuit the Petito family did against the Laundries. In 2022, they settled that for $3 million. That was for the wrongful death, for they claimed that the Laundrie family was liable for damages because Brian Laundrie caused her death, and therefore they were able to sue the family as Brian Laundrie's actions. That was for $3 million. God bless. I know that will do nothing for these families, but God bless that they were at least in some courtroom somewhere. Somebody was able to say this man caused this beautiful woman's life to lose her life. But then there was also an emotional distress lawsuit, and this had more to do with the cover-up and with the not sharing information and for the misleading. That was another thing, is they kept on making it sound like she might be alive when they knew damn well she was dead. And in 2024, they settled that case as well with the Laundries, but that was for an undisclosed amount. And speculate as you want with that. They kind of through their attorney said they wanted to put it all behind them and just kind of move on with their lives. The amount was not disclosed. The amount of love and heartache and everything that goes out for the Petito family for what they've gone through, you can kind of understand if they just wanted to have an end to this whole thing. Yeah, but that is how it all played out. I would have actually liked to seen how that played out in court, because it was an interesting question of, can the withholding of information cause somebody emotional distress? That's a really just kind of interesting legal question. Can the not sharing of information alone be enough to cause somebody emotional harm and distress that would lead to financial damages? And we don't know, at least as how it would have played out in this case. But thank you so much, Ruan, for bringing that case up. I know that was a case that brought a lot of people to the true crime community, and it's a great documentary. You guys should check it out. All right. Let's get to the next one here. Onward.
Hi, my name is Heather. I'm calling from Los Angeles, and I had a question about judges allowing or not allowing in certain evidence. I know this case is an older case, but I watched the documentary for Scott Peterson, and there was a motion to test different items for DNA. One of them was a mattress that was in the van that was across the street from the Peterson's house when Lacey disappeared. And that evidence was, the judge denied it being tested, I believe. And I just wondered why. Like, if there's something that could possibly exonerate somebody, why would a judge not allow that to be tested? That's my question. Thank you.
Great question, Heather from Los Angeles. Again, I love this stuff because this is not what I would thought I would be chatting about on a Sunday morning. But again, a wonderful, great question. So I think it's first of all to understand what where we are procedurally when we're talking about this. At the trial level, as far as testing things, the defense nor prosecution does not need the court's approval. Okay. That's the investigatory phase. If they want to go out and test something, they can go out and test it. Prosecution can test whatever they want. There might be rare circumstances where the evidence is in the custody and control of the prosecution and the defense needs an order from the judge to allow them to test it. But as far as like permission to test something, you're trying to prove a case here. You're allowed to go out and gather whatever evidence you want. But what's happening in the Scott Peterson case and why it's very different and therefore why the decision is different is we're talking about a post-conviction request here. This is the Los Angeles Innocence Project, I think is who it is that's handling this. And they are asking for the judge to order retesting or initial testing of some of these things. And because you're in that phase, they do need the court's permission, I think, both for the funds to do it and for the permission to have access to some of the evidence. And they need to do it because they want to know that if they do the testing, will it be considered by the judge? Because that's the other thing is that now, if they go out and test something and the judge says, well, I'm not going to allow that in anyways, it's all kind of part and parcel to the same argument here. So there was a bloodstained mattress that I know a lot of people have been talking about. Oh, it was bloodstained mattress found in this van near the location. Could that have anything to do with it? Well, the judge argued that the 2019 testing of that mattress did not show blood, that it was a stained mattress, but there was no indication that there was blood. And there is no evidence presented that some sort of new technology exists to change that result. And the judge felt that there was not an adequate showing of evidence by the defense that that mattress had anything to do with the murders. So again, there's a wide chasm between suspicion and relevance. And you may feel that it's suspicious that this van existed and it's suspicious the circumstances surrounding it. And if you do watch that documentary that Heather recommended, it is another good one. I think it's also on Netflix. And they talk about this a little bit. There may be a lot of people going, hey, I'm curious about that, but that doesn't, according to this judge, at least rise to the level of granting access to it to have it tested for the purposes of trying to overturn this conviction. Kraken Studio, The Real Booty says, but was all fabric tested or just a swab? Well, no, I am sure you're right. Not every square inch of it was tested, but I imagine enough of it was tested, especially in the stains, to determine whether or not that was blood, and they found that it wasn't. But you raise a good question. I mean, and that's kind of the judge's job, is at what point do we say enough's enough? Are we going to continue to revisit these cases again and again and again? Because you're like, well, you didn't test this part of the mattress, or you didn't test this part of the rope that was used, or you didn't, but in this case, well, first of all, there was other stuff that was denied. There was a glove and a hammer that was found in a neighbor's home where there was a break-in. They said that the glove and the hammer did not remain in police custody. Therefore, there's a problem with the chain of custody. Therefore, there's a problem with foundationally even testing those items. But the judge did allow for testing of an item. There was duct tape found on Lacey Peterson's pants. There was DNA present. And because the defense was able to get past those other hurdles, the relevance of it, there is the existence of DNA, and there are new testing techniques that might prove helpful, the judge is going to allow for retesting of that duct tape. So that'll be interesting. I don't know. If it comes back to Scott, then what do we do? If it comes back to her, then what do we do? But if it comes back to some other person, yeah, you could be talking about this case quite a bit. If it comes back to, the guys that were arrested for that break-in, then we're talking some interesting stuff here. My my suspicions are probably it's going to come back to Scott or Lacey. You know, I mean, I know this is one of those cases that, again, we're talking about 30 years later because it's fascinating, but, you know, I don't know. I feel like if I say anything more, I'm going to get yelled at. So we will continue to monitor and follow. But thank you again, Heather, for the wonderful question. Lamam, along those lines, could Kohberger defense test the unknown male B and D blood samples through a place like Othram if the prosecution doesn't want to? Defense can and must disclose results. The answer is, yeah, they can test it if they're given access to it. They're allowed to do their own testing. So yeah, they could test it. Now the question becomes, what system would they run that through? And you're saying if they ran it through a place like Othram, and I'm not familiar with them, the problem is you can get a genetic profile, but if you don't have something to match that to, all you have is a genetic profile. And they know that it's not Kohberger, so it already kind of discloses what the defense is trying to say is it's not their guy. But how are they going to get it into a system to determine whose it is the problem. I'll be honest with you. I don't think they want to know. I think they're much happier with the idea that it's unknown and that it's male. And I think that's probably best for their argument to say, hey, you guys were so busy going after our guy, you didn't pursue these other things, did you? In fact, you never submitted it to CODIS, did you? And I think that's the moment they're hoping for. But, you know, this could backfire on them if they do get it tested and it comes back to somebody who was, you know, out of town that time, somebody with a rock solid alibi. Then what do? It doesn't really help them. Then it becomes irrelevant altogether. I don't know where I was going. Now I've completely lost my train of thought. Anyhow, yeah, Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson, crazy stuff going on there. We'll see what happens with that DNA testing on the duct tape. All right. Moving onward.
Hey, Courtroom Confidential. It's Sonia in Chicago. And we all know Josh is an awesome attorney and he's an awesome dad. So the question is, how are your dad jokes? Because you're going to need them. So what's your best one? That one's for Krista. Anyway, thank you. Bye now.
That's cute. Thank you, Sonia from Chicago. How are my dad jokes? Well, I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. So right now, if I just say the word poo-poo, I can crack them up for hours. I get absolute rolling over themselves laughing if I just say poo-poo. So that's the extent of my dad jokes for now. But I will tell you my shortest and stupidest joke that makes me laugh. Man goes to a funeral, approaches the grieving widow and says, "Would you mind if I said a word?" And the widow says, "Please do." So the man approaches the podium and he clears his throat and he says, "Plethora." And the woman leans over and says, "Thanks. That means a lot." I love that joke because it's so stupid. And because when I told that joke to Tiffany, she looked at me like she had no idea what I was talking about and thought she absolutely hates that joke. And I think because it's so stupid and because she hates it, I think I love it even that much more. But that is my dad joke of the day. So thank you for that, Sonia, for making me subject everyone to that. You do have to pause a second to catch it. All right. Let's move on here. Moving on.
Hello, Joshua Ritter and the Confidential Crew family. This is Alicia K. Mayo from Tennessee. Okay, regarding the Menendez brothers. First, let's take it back a ways to 1979 when Brenda Spencer, age 16, on a Monday that she did not like and wanted to liven up, shot and killed the Grover Cleveland Elementary School's principal and custodian, shot and injured 8 children and a police officer. I know she pled guilty and was sentenced to life sentences, and last month was denied parole again. We know that opens the door for her and any other youthful offender to possibly ask for a habeas or a resentencing, since Gavin Newsom did what he did recently. But my question is this: what about all the ones that were sentenced as youthful offenders back in the day that didn't make it out, that passed on? Does this open the door for their family, their estate, to possibly sue the state of California for some sort of monetary damages? We like your thoughts. Happy Sunday, everybody. Josh, can't wait to hear your answer. Thanks.
Oh, Alicia K. Mayo, it would not be a Sunday without you. Thank you so much for calling in all the way from Tennessee. What a great question. And this brought up a case that I had not, I'll be honest, I don't think I even ever heard of it, but it caused me to do a little research, and it's really fascinating. But she mentions Brenda Spencer. This is Brenda. She was 16 years old. And she's considered to be the first mass school shooter. I mean, it's just a incredibly nightmarish case, but this is back in January 29th of 1979. She goes to Grover Cleveland Elementary School in the San Carlos neighborhood of San Diego, so here in Southern California. Opens up fire, ends up killing 2 people and injuring 9 others. And the case made headlines for a number of reasons. First of all, you're talking about a 16-year-old girl. First of all, you're talking about this idea of mass shootings at a school that was just kind of unheard of. Today it seems like we've just tragically become almost used to it, but it was a unheard of type of thing back then. And then to add to all of it, she told a reporter why she did it, and she said something along the lines of, "I don't like Mondays," and that just, people ran with that and lost their minds. Anyhow, she was sentenced to 25 to life for the murders, and she was recently, I think last month, denied parole for the 6th time. She's been eligible for parole for over 32 years, but she was denied, or no, she's been in prison for 32 years, but she was denied. Wait a minute, am I wrong here? She's been eligible for parole, I think, for 32 years, but she has been denied 6 times in that 32 years. And Alicia's question, though, is inspiration for the song "I Don't Like Mondays." Oh, that's interesting too. Thank you, Alicia. Your question, though, is what is this idea of the California youthful offender parole issue? And I think you're relating that back to the Menendez brothers. How does this all play out? So something interesting to understand here is that, first of all, the law about youthful offenders was passed back in 2014, and it applied to any person who had committed a crime under the age of 18. They were under the age of 18 at the time of the crime, and it allowed for them to receive credits different than credits of a adult offender. In 2018, that was then changed so that anybody who committed a crime below the age of 26, okay? But there's a bunch of exceptions to this, and one of them, most notably, is that you cannot have been sentenced to life without parole. So Brenda Spencer was not sentenced to life without parole. She was sentenced to 25 to life. So whereas she received the credits for the California youthful offender, and whereas she may have become eligible for parole earlier, she's still been denied parole, which is an interesting thing when we're talking about Menendez too, because just because they become eligible doesn't necessarily mean they will be granted parole. As we know with Brenda Spencer, she's been denied parole 6 times. Talk about another case we've talked about today, Manson. The Manson killers had through a bunch of things I won't get into, but they had their sentences commuted to life sentences with parole eligible. They were all denied parole many times. over the course of years. Manson was denied every single time he came up. So just because somebody's parole eligible does not equate to them getting out. How does this all relate back to the Menendez brothers, though? The Menendez brothers are not parole eligible. They are currently sentenced to life without parole. So how in the world are we talking about them getting paroled? Well, that's what George Gascon was trying to do, is he was trying to strike the special allegations and have them resentenced. The special allegations in their case that made them eligible for the death penalty or life without parole was lying in wait and multiple murder. There's all these enumerated special circumstances. Lying in wait, multiple murders, murder for financial gain, murder during the course of certain enumerated felonies. All of these types of murders can turn a garden variety murder into a special circumstance murder. And if those special circumstances are found to be true by the jury, then that person can be eligible for the death penalty if they pursue it. And if they don't pursue it or the jury doesn't go along with it, the default is life without parole. So when you have a life without parole case, you're talking about a special circumstance murder case. That's what they were convicted of. Murder with the special circumstances of lying in wait and multiple murders. Therefore, they are not eligible for parole. If those special circumstances were stricken, then they would be eligible for parole. They would immediately default to a 50 to life type situation. But because they were under the age of 26 at the time of the commission, they would get those youthful offender credits and be immediately eligible for parole, but still have to go before the parole board. That is my long-winded way of saying that the Brenda situation and the Menendez situations are different, but they give us an opportunity to explore both of those situations. But then to answer Alicia's more specific question about civil liability, I don't think you're going to see a situation where that would even arise, because it just kind of automatically applies to these cases where they are eligible for parole. It's just they get the credits. Whether or not they ever get released is really up to the parole board. It's an entirely different question. I mean, there is a potential situation where the Menendez brothers could be resentenced, could be eligible for parole and still not get out for maybe a long period of time because the parole board says we don't feel that they're parole worthy. I mean, given the circumstances of their crime. But we'll see. Again, a case that continues to fascinate me. All right, onward. We're getting toward the end here. I was hoping that would be your answer. Thanks, Alicia. Thank you always for asking the questions too. All right. Hold on. Of course, we're going to have technical difficulties on the very last one here. Hold on.
Hey Josh, it's Farm Girl. A while back, you had mentioned to us a case where a young lady in Texas, I believe, had killed her classmate's goat, and I was just wondering if you knew what happened with that case. I saw where she had a court date in January, but I couldn't find anything about what happened. So just curious. It kind of piqued my interest because I'm heavily involved with the 4-H kids where I live. So talk to you later. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Farm Girl. Love to hear from you. Yeah, Farm Girl wants to know what happened to Goat Girl, the goat killer. We talked about this. I think it was on a Sunday Fun Day. In fact, it might have been the first one we ever talked about it. Kaylin's telling me, yeah, it was. Really bizarre case. This young lady right here, she was 17 years old at the time. Her name is Aubrey Van Landingham, out of Texas. And she force-fed a classmate's goat pesticides. And it's awful. And killed the goat. And when confronted, she finally confessed to it and says she did it because the owner of the goat, she thought that girl was a cheater, and she doesn't like cheaters. So she took it out on the goat. And it's awful and horrible and sad and all the things. And we talked about it, but Farm Girl brings up a good point. Well, what happened? So we looked into it. She has since been charged with a felony for cruelty to livestock. She's out on a $5,000 bond, which is, by the way, very low. But I think given the circumstances, her age, probably lack of a criminal history, the judge felt that that was appropriate. She's been ordered to not be around any animals, including her own pets, without adult supervision while she's waiting for trial. And she's not had her trial yet. And there's a hearing coming up in March. And we'll try to stay updated with that. But it's an interesting case because I don't know if she's going to go to trial. I have a feeling, a sneaking suspicion this will probably be something that is worked out and she receives some sort of probation. But yeah, Kathy Davidson says she needs help. I think she does. I mean, it's just disturbing behavior. I mean, children do dumb things, but this is dumb to the level of what's going on in your head. Other people who kill animals go on to kill humans. Lynn Keeble says that's true. Hold on. Where did it go here? Future says she needs a psych eval. I agree. There's something going on in this young girl's head. You don't just kill animals because you're upset with the other person. I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying. But guess what? That is our last message. That is our last voice message. You guys, like I said, came through. I am so impressed and tickled and pleased, and it was an honor and a privilege that you guys asked these questions and all of your wonderful comments and all of the nice things that you guys had to say. Thank you so much. What a wonderful Sunday fun day that turned out to be. And keep them coming. Keep them coming. We will answer as many questions as we possibly can, as many as you guys want to send us. And I just love the creativity and but I never could have sat down and thought, here's what we're going to talk about on a Sunday, and came up with as good of the ideas that you guys came up with. Tiffany says, should we do this every Sunday? Tiffany doesn't like when Josh doesn't have work. So she likes to keep Josh working. But I would do it every Sunday. If we had enough questions to fill out every Sunday, I would do it every Sunday. So you guys let us know by sending us the questions, and we will try to keep up with you. Okay. What do we got coming up for you? First of all, yesterday, Saturday, we had our latest episode of the weekly roundup, and we did it as a premiere. Joshua, thank you so much for becoming a member. We did it as a premiere, and I wanted to let you guys know, I think that's going to be our new thing. So on Saturday mornings, we're going to do live premieres of our weekly roundups. Even though they are recorded episodes, it's just more fun to have people involved. And the response from it was fantastic, and you guys all seem to love it. So we'll continue to do more of that because we got such a good response from it. So every Saturday at, what time are we going to do it at, Tiff? I think we did it at 6 a.m. Pacific, which makes it 9 a.m. Eastern. But if you guys can join us on Saturday mornings for those live premieres, that's good. Maureen, you got questions? I got hopefully answers. You send them to us. So that is our Saturdays, what we got going on. Then this coming Monday, the latest in our Courtroom Confidential Conversation series is going to be with Gavin Fish. Gavin's remarkable. He's a journalist, which is a career he took later in his life. And he's a true crime YouTuber. And he is one of the most heavily researched and get into the weeds type of guys you will ever meet. And he's a crime solver. I mean, that's really what he should say on his resume is he's a crime solver. He really is. And he's one of the driving people behind the whole Ellen Greenberg saga. So we sat down with him, had a fascinating conversation that will premiere tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. But please, please, please join us 30 minutes early when we do our live countdown show before we then transport you through the magic of YouTube over to the premiere of the Gavin Fish interview. And we're going to try to get Gavin to be in the chat and say hi to everybody. This Wednesday, we're doing our Wednesday night live, and the plan is to have Gisela as a guest in some form or the other. We're trying to work it out because she, obviously lives in Europe. So when we do our 5 p.m. lives, it's 2 a.m. in the morning her time, and I can't do that to her. So maybe we're going to do something recorded ahead of time and play it all for you guys. But in any way, if you got questions for Gisela, I think we're going to talk a little bit about Corey Richins, and maybe we'll get into the Zizians. I don't know, but that will be on Wednesday. Then our membership is open. If you want to become a member, go to thecourtroomconfidential.com, click on become a member, click on join the crew, hear about all of the benefits of the membership program. I know a lot of you are. I know we had some new people join up today, so thank you so much. We really try to put a lot of work and effort into making that something that's of value to all of you. Go to thecourtroomconfidential.com and click on shop for all of our new merch. These are new items. These zip ups and sweatpants. Where's the sweatpants? Oh, here they are. I love these sweatpants. I'm wearing these sweatpants right now. They're fantastic. And if you buy some of our merch, or if you have already, take a picture. Please send it to us. Send it to, I'm going to have them send it to your account, Tiffany, media@joshuaritter.com. Or what are we doing? I don't know. Send us a picture. Yes. Kaylin says yes. Send it to media@joshuaritter.com. And we're going to share it on our social if you're comfortable with that. But we would love to see you in the merchandise, just so we can show it off to everybody, because we've, like I said, put a lot of work into that too. And then finally, if you want more of these Sunday fun days and you enjoy what's been happening, go to thecourtroomconfidential.com, click on send us a voice message. This little box will pop up. You're going to do a quick shot of Jägermeister, and you're going to leave us a message and let us know whatever question you got. And it's been a blast spending this morning with all of you guys doing that. I can't thank you all enough. Thank you so much, Anna Lee. Yeah, did we miss any of the stickers? Thank you so much, Rosemarie J, for becoming a member, and Black Widower for becoming a member, and Rainy Day just wants to say thank you, and Mama She. Appreciate the viewers. You're amazing. Emily Flotilla, thank you so much for the appreciation. Afton for gifting the memberships. That's fantastic. Thank you, Afton. You guys are amazing. You really are. And Emily gifted memberships as well. You make this such a special thing. And Rosemary for the super chat. Helen B for becoming a member. Kraken Studio became a member today. Fantastic. And gifted memberships. You guys are wonderful. Manuela B became a member. Kathy says thank you. Became a member. Criminal law instead of family law. You make me wish I had gone to criminal. Oh, you probably made a wise decision, Kathy. DSN for the super sticker. Thank you so much. Am I missing anybody? Wow. Covia 43. Thank you for the Grizzly plug. You're both awesome. She deserves every bit of it. Redondo Beach, shout out to my mom, just turned 88. Fantastic. She'll see, oh my goodness, she'll see me graduate. Redondo, that is so very cool. Congratulations. Noda 37 became a member. Wow, what a wonderful morning. You guys are fantastic. Redondo became a member. That's everything. Okay. Wow. I was saying thank you, but now I really have a lot of things to be thankful for. You guys, your support is amazing. It's what makes this all worthwhile to us. It makes us. This is not a job. This is an absolute pleasure, and I am completely thankful to you guys for that. Thank you for showing up on a Sunday morning. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we will be talking to you soon. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.